Okay, here's from devil's advocate type of situation. From that perspective, I have heard skeptics say that personality tests are flawed because different mood, different answers. People change uh, from 1 minute to the next. So how can we base so much weight in the Clifton test or any
Clifton
other?
Strength, yeah. I'm so glad you asked this because I am a huge skeptic about these things too. I'm the person that's like, this seems like you made it up. And so I actually did research behind this to find out if there is validity behind it. And what I found is, and I can only speak to the Clifton Strengths test, like Myers Briggs and DISC and all these other ones, they do not have the scientific research behind it to be able to make the same claims that the Clifton Strengths Assessment can. So I'm only speaking about Clifton Strengths Assessment. But when we're looking at Clifton Strengths Assessment, there's two big data points that I think are really important. Number one is Gallup has tested this to see if it changes over periods of time or day to day, et cetera. So they've spent the millions of dollars to research this already. What they've found is that you might see slight movement. Like your number two theme might now show up as your number five, but your top 10, top 12 really stay the same. Just the order might change a little bit, but they generally are going to be the same. You may have like a number two move to 13. That would be kind of a big difference, but not enough to be significant. You are almost never going to see, for the most part, your one go to your 34. It's just very unlikely, unless there's like a major trauma or something like that. That's where they recommend retaking it. But all other things being equal, they see no virtual difference in the outcome. So that's number one. But then a lot of it's in the interpretation of it, right? It's not just that I have the strengths and I know that competition is my number one, communication is my number two. It's when I work with Rosie, I asked her this because I was skeptical. I said, how do I know you're not just like making up something that sounds good and this is actually what it should be? And so I asked her a series of questions beyond that. And here's what I found out. If you are speaking to five different Clifton certified Clifton Strengths coaches, okay, you speak to five of them, and you don't know any of them, they have no prior knowledge, no additional data points. You walk into a room, there are five of them there, and I say, hey, I'm running into this issue with my employee. Here is my report, and here's her report. Here's what it looks like. She's a project manager, and I give them the exact same details, and they all hear the same details. They're all going to ask me follow up questions because they'll need to ask some questions to get to a conclusion. But if they all hear and receive the exact same data points, there's about a 90% overlap in what they are going to tell me. So that means like 10% of it is like variable and probably influenced by the person that is coaching you and their life experience and their own results. But all other things being equal, you're going to get the same outcome almost every single time. And so for me, that's a really good predictor of the accuracy of it. It would be different if I talked to five different coaches and they all came up with different responses. That would mean that, okay, you're just making it up and it's just your interpretation, kind of like a therapist, right? Like they're interpreting it through their experience, their expertise, their lens of what you're telling them. But if you talk to five therapists at the same time, they're not all going to necessarily give you the same response or feedback. They might all come to the same diagnosis, but they might not give you the same feedback or response. And so that to me was the thing that I was like, oh, okay, this is actually legitimate and rooted in actual science and not just somebody's like whim. Like one of the tests, I think Myers Briggs or one of them was developed by some random lady at her kitchen table. It's not done in a scientific way the way the Clifton Franks is done.
I've heard about the history behind the actual background behind the Myers Briggs, and it's voodoo. Uh, yeah, that one and anything based off Myers Briggs, it sounds like hogwash. But
Yeah.
uh, but oh, I on the flip side, speaking of competitive streak, anytime anytime I take one of these tests, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, how do I win? Right?
Oh, you must
How do
hate
I
competition.
beat this test? How do I make myself look the best?
Really good. Oh, yeah, you might be high significance too.
What's that?
You might be high significance too.
Well, I wanna win. I'm gonna maximize my efforts,
Mm.
right? So when I take this thing, I want the best score, not just my score.
Okay, when you take it, you'll have to tell me your results because I think we're very similar. I'm number 1 competition, I'm number 5 significance, I'm high maximizer, and it sounds like you maybe share those qualities.
When if my picture of a good test score, an accurate test score is when somebody else looks at the test, after the fact, goes, "Wow, yeah."
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're probably high significance too.
So, yeah, unfortunately, I also fear that the test might be flawed, my
Little
results.
suspicion.
So, what's next for you? Actually, I want to ask you though, is going back to the assets. Why did you said you have a particular fondness for commercial residential apartment buildings, but uh, why not other commercial assets? If you could scale,
Yeah, this is a question that we get asked often, and I think about it often. And, I told you at the beginning of this, I have a lot of different asset classes in my own portfolio. We decided that we want to go an inch wide and a mile deep, not a mile wide and an inch deep. And so I wanted to be a master of one thing, and that is multifamily. You would be very hard pressed to put me into a room that I don't have significantly more knowledge than most of the people in that room about multifamily because that is my craft. That is the thing I'm an expert in. And when someone thinks multifamily, they think Vina Jetty. And when someone thinks of Vina Jetty, they think of multifamily. And so they're kind of synonymous. And I like to keep it that way because I can be an absolute master of one craft and I can just knock that out of the park. If you look to the most successful people in the world, most of them started and got really the bulk of their success by being really good at one niche thing that they do. And so the philosophy that I have is invest in multifamily. If at some point we decide to branch out into something else, we can and we will. And I will do it with the right partners who their craft and their one thing that they've always done is whatever asset class, right? Like if we decide to go into like build to rent communities, that's really high on my list of things that I would like to expand into. If we go into BTR, we are going to be doing it with consultants, advisors, partners, brokers, investors that really know everything about BTR. That's going to be the thing that we do. If we decide to go to self storage, same thing true. I'm going to go find the best self storage operator and I'm going to partner up with them because I want someone who's a master of their craft. There are so many things to know that when I see somebody as an LP, when I see somebody who's in self storage and assisted living and multifamily and mobile home parks and restaurant and retail and office and hotel, I'm like, okay, who's running all of these? And they're like, oh, it's just us. It's our team of 3 people. I'm like, no, you cannot possibly know everything that you need to know to operate at a base level, let alone be great.
well, self storage is just like apartment buildings without all the people.
I like self storage. I have it in my portfolio. I just don't want to put my investors' money at risk on something that I don't operate day in and day out and know backward, forward, and in my sleep.
Well, what I was getting at though is are there certain conditions in which you might consider, going outside that scope? Because, you know, being, we mentioned earlier, we talked about the market and the flooding of this one particular um, industry, this sector. Uh, and then what happens if the laws change? Residential, there's a lot of regulation around residences, landlord laws, that kind of stuff, tenant laws. Is there like do you have a set of standards that says if this changes, we're going to have to find something else, or we're just going to get better at it?
Yeah, we do have investment standards that we hold very, very central to what we do. So, yes. However, I would say that anybody that's looking for something that doesn't have risk should really not be investing. Go get a government bond or something, right? Because there's going to be risk in any kind of investment, especially if you're looking for something that's going to beat the S&P 500. You're going to have risk. So when an investor asks me, if it's risk free, I say absolutely not. There's risk in this. If you are looking for something risk free, this is not it. In self storage or in RV parks, you're going to run into similar laws or issues with government issues that you can't control. You don't know. And anytime there's an administration change, we never know what that's going to mean for the real estate as a whole, not just multifamily. So, yes, these are risks. We do our best to mitigate them and know about them upfront going in. A lot of times, our assets, because they're already existing and in operation, a lot of times they're grandfathered into whatever rules that come about in the future. For example, the deal we bought last year, we bought it, and I guess it was like 2 weeks before we closed. Phoenix, the market that it's in, the submarket that it's in, revoked all the new build permits because they have a water shortage. And so they said, we can't give you a new build because you won't be able to get enough water there. And of course, we already had water. This is an asset that's 30 years old. So we already have water, and that water is obviously can't be turned off. There are residents there. So for us, like those types of changes, usually we get grandfathered in, or if they happen, we will handle them as they come. We do build in for contingencies and redundancies across our assets, but you never know what's going to happen in any asset class. And so you have to always be prepared for the unexpected.